Hi everyone, and welcome to Mini Lecture 11. Today we're going to be discussing MLA citations. Before we begin, take a second to gather the materials for this lecture assignment. You'll need a blank Word document to do some writing on and access to your current project draft materials. The purpose and goals for today's lecture are as follows. First, we'll discuss the purpose and place of MLA, then we'll examine different formatting considerations, and finally we'll examine methods for in-text and works cited page citations. So what is MLA? MLA, you will probably hear this drop several times over the course of your academic career. It stands for Modern Language Association. It's now most commonly used in the humanities, so if you're taking an English class, or if you are doing anything in literature or philosophy, religious studies, anything of that nature, we'll typically use MLA citation. Now, when we think about the basic considerations for MLA, there are some things that we do need to include, and sometimes not all the information is available, so you just want to check as many boxes as you possibly can, especially for digital digital sources. So, if you're citing a website, you might not be able to get all this information, but just get as much as you can. However, with things like academic journals, scholarly articles, things of that nature, you should be able to tick off each one of these boxes. So first, you'll want to make sure that you're including the name or names of the author or authors. You'll also want to make sure that you have the full title of the article or the piece that you're looking at. You also want to make sure that you're including the date of publication as well as the volume number and issue number. This will be especially important when you are composing citations for academic journals, scholarly journals. And then, of course, you're going to want the publisher, and we'll see here in a second the different ways that can manifest based off of the site or the source that we are pulling information from. Now, when we think about the works cited page, now that is the last bit of your writing, and that is basically where you tell your reader, here is a fleshed out list of every single source I've used, and if you want to find this information for yourself and read it on your own time, here is how you can find it. Here's all the information. So that's your works cited page. And when we think about how to cite or format a works cited page, we want to remember to include a hanging indent. Now, with the hanging indent, what that does, and the reason, it looks weird. Honestly, it does, and especially since it's kind of an inverted version of what a traditional paragraph looks like. The reason that we include a hanging indent is so that the reader can navigate through your different sources with greater ease. So if everything was flush left, or even did a traditional indent where the first line was indented over rather than the first line being flush left and everything else being indented over, it could be very difficult to sift through all of that information. So the hanging indent really does allow the reader to say, oh, okay, well, in the article they cited Smith, so I can more easily go down the works cited list that they've provided and find the last name Smith. We also want to remember that it's alphabetized as well. Now, this is a fairly standard practice across different style guides, that if they call it regardless of whether they call it a bibliography, a references page, or works cited, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be alphabetized. And that, again, is just for ease of finding information. So even if the first person that you cite, let's say their last name starts with Z, it doesn't matter if you cite them in the very first paragraph, in the very first sentence, they're at the back of the works cited page. They're at the very end of it. So please do remember that your sources will need to be alphabetized when composing any works cited page. So when we think about how to format and how to design these different works cited entries, Some key considerations that we want to be aware of is, first and foremost, all major publications are italicized. Now, for academic journals, that means the journal titles. So like the Journal of Molecular Biology Research, or the Journal of Pop Culture, or the Journal of Finance Management, or whatever journal it is that you're citing from, that would be italicized. Same with magazines, so Time, People, or whatever other type of magazine you might find yourself citing. Same thing with movies, TV shows, newspapers. Oftentimes will italicize the larger works that are responsible for distributing smaller works. So you think about it this way. A journal holds in it articles. A magazine also includes articles. Movies have scenes, TV shows have episodes, newspapers have articles or columns, and so they're kind of the larger body of work. And so we want to make sure that that is italicized. But we also, with the more specific information that we're pulling from, the more specific source that we're pulling from, we want to encase those works published in major publications in quotation marks. So the way that those will typically manifest will be article titles in, be it newspapers, magazines, journals, and episode titles. So if you are citing something like a TV show or a TED Talk or something of that nature, you would put that in quotation marks. And then in the body of your text, as you're referring to the source and giving them credit for their words, you first want to introduce the author or authors by full name, sorry. So you'll introduce them by full name, and then every other time that you reference them in your work, you will refer to them by last name. So while you might say the first time that you quote someone or borrow from someone, you say, according to Dr. John Smith, blah, 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 blah. And then every time you refer back to Smith's work, you would just say, recalling what Smith said, or Smith further complicates this idea. So you just refer to that author or authors by last name throughout the rest of the body of your work. So let's first look at how we compose citations for print-based sources. Now, with books, and you'll notice that these are all fairly consistent. There are just little variations among different types of media. So with books, we've got last name, comma, first name, title of book, publisher, and publication date. So in our example here, we have Shirky, comma, Clay, and then we've italicized, here comes everybody, the power of organizing without organization. Then we've also got the publisher, which would be Penguin Press, and then the publication date. Now with books, you're not going to get, oftentimes you won't get something that says like September 30th, 2011. Rather, you're just going to get the year of publication. And so that is perfectly acceptable to include if that's the only information available to you. We see a similar pattern with journals as well. So we've got the author or authors, and then we do it by last name, then first name. Then we've got the title of the article encased in quotations, and then the title of the journal, and that should be italicized. I apologize. A comma, volume number, comma, issue, comma, year, comma, pages, period. So if we look at this example here, we've got Dahlberg, comma, Lincoln, in quotation marks, the Habermasian public sphere taking difference seriously, end quotation. Then we've italicized the journal title, Theory and Society. We've got the volume number, the issue number, the year of publication, and the pages that we could, go to if we were looking for this article in the journal itself. And we see a similar pattern with magazines. So again, we've got authors, title of article, title of periodical, month, day, year, comma, pages. So what I think is interesting about this example here is that we've got more than one author. We've got two authors, which is, rather common, especially in academic works as well. It's not really rare, but it is rarer to find single authored text. Typically, especially in sciences, social sciences, you will find multi-authored articles. And so when we want to format that using MLA, what we could do here is we could apply the same pattern that we see with magazines. So we've got the lead author, and please do keep in mind that the order in which these authors are written in the citation, it's not about alphabetical order. It's about whoever was listed first on the article. And so when you look at the authors of the article, their names are written in a specific order for a certain reason. And you want to make sure that you reflect that in your citation. So looking at this here, when we've got two authors, we've got Barcott, Bruce, and Michael Schurer. And so rather than following the last name, first name, with the second author, we do it first name, last name. And the same would be true if we had 3 or 4. The lead author would be written last name, first name, and then whoever our second author is, or second and third author. We then have the title of the article in quotations, much like we do with journals, with scholarly journals. So the Great Health Experiment. Then we have italicized the title of the periodical, so Time Magazine. Now this one is interesting because while Time, much like scholarly journals, often has a volume or an issue number associated with it, this was actually a special edition magazine, or this was a special edition publication, and so I wouldn't include numbers because there are no numbers associated with it, but I still do want to indicate that, hey, this is a special edition, and so if you're looking for it, it's not going to have a volume number, it's not going to have an issue number, it's going to be a special edition. And then of course we have included the page numbers as well. Now with this one, there was no day, month, year of publication, again, because it was a special edition and they did a number of reprints. But if that information is available to you, you do want to make sure that it is included. But like we see through this example, there are times when all of the information is going to just fall at your feet, and other times where it's just not going to be available. And you know what? That's okay. You work with the information that you have. Now let's turn our attention to digital sources. So I want to focus carefully on websites and blogs. So when we look at websites, again, we start to see this similar pattern that we saw when citing print-based works. And one thing that I do want to point out before we move on is that even though you will be locating the scholarly journals digitally, so through the library databases, we still format them as print-based sources, and we still will format it using this second type of formatting that we see here under the journals bullet. So yes, do keep that in mind, that with academic journals, even though you're accessing them digitally through a scholarly database, you would still follow this journals print-based type of citation. Okay, so returning back to digital sources, when we think about a website, the first thing that we'll want to include, there are no authors identified on this page. And so since we don't have the author's name provided, we just go straight to the next bit of information, and that would be the title of the page itself. So mentoring and support. And much like the article title or the episode title, this too is encased in quotation marks because it is a smaller bit of information that has been distributed by a larger entity. So in this case, the DSU Women's Resource Center. And so we would italicize that. We would treat that as a periodical. We treat it as a TV show, a magazine article, or a magazine title, sorry, a journal title, things of that nature. Then we also want to include the year. So with websites, sometimes you can get an exact day of publication. Other times you just get the year. More often than not, you'll just get the year. Again, work with the information that you have available to you. And then finally, to ensure that your readers can locate the information that you're citing with websites, since they are immediately available to everyday users, we want to include the URL in there as well. So that way, if I wanted to, I could just click on this and go straight to the page in which the writer found their information from. Now, when we look at blogs, blogs are a little different than websites. Even though blogs are created on websites, we cite them a bit differently. So the first thing that we want to keep in mind is that we want to, of course, first try and find the editor, screen name, author, or compiler name, if available. So with blogs, You might find a person's real name, you might find a snarky screen name, you might have no name at all, and that is perfectly fine. Again, work with the information that you have access to. And even if it's a really silly screen name, you still do want to include it. So, and then after you've done that, you'll include the posting title, and then the name of the site, version number again, if available, and then the name of the institution / organization affiliated with the site, again, if available. Sometimes you'll find independent writers who aren't associated with an organization or a company. No one's sponsoring them, they're just writing to write. And so again, just if you've got that, you want to include it. Then you also want to make sure that you include the URL, much like we did with the website, and also the date of access. So when did you find the article? When did you first lay eyes on it? Or the blog post, I mean. So if we see here, we've got the author. So in this case, we found the author. We can positively identify this individual as the author of the blog. So Caraway, Al, period. And then we've included the posting title, so how we've been teaching the most important thing wrong. And then there is no institution or organization affiliated with the site, but in order to ensure that our readers can find it, we've included the URL here and the date that we accessed it. Now let's turn our attention to in-text citations. Now these are going to be within the body of your work itself. So remember that in-text citations serve as a visual signal to readers. They are a way to basically say, hey, we are about to depart from my own original words and I'm about to borrow the words from a source. And so the in-text citations can help you do that and really, again, help you visually distinguish where your voice ends, the source's begins, and vice versa, where the source's ends and where yours begins again. So in order to do this properly with MLA, the first thing that we want to turn our attention to is the page number at the end of the citation, including the page number at the end of the citation. So we see here, in her work, so we're introducing the source there, Anderson warns us of the dangers of artificial intelligence. And then we've included the page number that we found that information on and then ended the sentence with a period. If you're citing information from an online scholarly journal, which are becoming quite common, so they won't have page numbers, or if you're working on a project that you can use popular sources such as a TED Talk or a website or something of that nature, you want to move on to the next thing. So this might be the author's name. So maybe if in the first example, if we didn't have a page number, we could say in our work, Anderson warns us of the dangers of artificial intelligence. And then we put Anderson in the parentheses. Or we can see through this example, if we are, especially with government pages that typically don't have specific authors identified, we can include the title of the work that we are referring to. So in this case, the research indicates a steady yet unforeseeable rise in the flu virus among southern Utah and Nevada residents. And then we've included, again, the title of the article, Report on Regional Flu Trends. And then we've closed the parentheses and ended the sentence with a period. And so again, be sure to include those in-text citations. This is really what's going to help you avoid concerns of plagiarism. Because, again, what this does is it visually distinguishes where your voice ends and a source's begins. Now that we've considered those basic components for MLA citation, let's talk about the lecture assignment. What I'd like you to do is review your current project materials and identify one source in your work. Now, if you're working on Project 1, that can be the artifact that you're analyzing. Project 2 could be one of the sources that you use to explore a certain perspective. And for Projects 3 through 5, it could be an entry in your annotated bib. It could be a piece of evidence in your argument that you either use in, the actual paper version or the multimodal redesign. So again, regardless of where you're at, identify, again, one source, and it can be whatever you want, whatever medium. And then using the considerations we discussed, I want you to cite the source using MLA style and making sure that things are properly italicized, the quotations are where they need to be, the commas are where they need to be, and just making sure that you can do these by hand. So that concludes today's lecture. If you have any questions or if there are any concepts that I can speak to further, please don't hesitate to contact me. Okay, everybody, until next time.